إني ألقى الإناس في صومي وصلاتي ودعائي للرحمن وجميع الطاعات.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our first episode of our assessment of the scientific miracles narrative. Basically, as a precursor, first of all, let me introduce you. Abu Sophia is with me. Abu Sophia, how you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you for having me, akhi.
You know, it's my pleasure, man. We've got another video of you in one of our other videos.
Yeah,
you can be welcome to obviously see that as well.
Jazakumullah.
Now, what we're doing before we start is we're going through systematically the claims made by both Muslim propagandists and non-Muslim propagandists to try and assert that there is what they would refer to as A, either scientific miracles of the Quran, or B, scientific errors of the Quran. Both of them use a very similar strategy, in a sense. I mean, they go to the old exegesis with the tafsir of the Quran, and they try and pick out that which either goes in line with science or contradicts science. What we're going to do, hopefully, to start off with, is discuss, or just refer you guys actually to something we've already done with Sabur Ahmed, who's kind of, you might know him for his polemics against evolutionists and his debates with evolutionists, where we kind of to conclude what he said, we concluded that in terms of science and the philosophy of science, the highest form of science, or the strongest science you could say, is observational science. So if you have a vase and you drop a vase and the vase breaks, this is something which is observationally true. You can see it. It's an observation, right? Now, how the vase breaks in terms of the theory of gravity or theories of gravity, that's changed. You know, there was first Newtonian understanding and then an Einsteinian understanding, for example, right? So theories are not as strong as observations, but even observations, we concluded, can change as well. And one of those examples is the sun. It was observed to be static, respective to the Earth, and then it was observed to have its own rotation around itself and in the Milky Way. So the point being, everything in science can be criticized, and science is not incorrigible in the sense that it can change. So that's the first really important point that we have to make when we're discussing these things. Now, the thing is, what has happened is there was a person named Maurice Bucquois who wrote a book which was he was a French Egyptologist, and he went to Egypt and these things, and he found Ramses II's body and all these things. I'm not sure if you've read his book, but what his book was called is The Bible, Quran and Science, and it was a comparison of the Quran, the Bible, and the scientific method. And what's happened is this has been translated into what is referred to as Bucquoism, and probably the biggest advocate of his books or his kind of material, his Daaee material, is Zakir Naik, who everyone probably knows who I'm talking about. Zakir Naik is probably, if not the most, one of the most influential, most influential propagator of Islam in terms of the Daaee world. Right? When I say influence, I mean effect on people. He's had the most effect on people in terms of the Daaee and probably the whole of the world. Now, for this reason, we're going to use the Zakir Naik template, and we're going to go through some of the things that he's said. We're going to scrutinize it, but we're also going to see what other people have said on the other side, who scrutinize it in a way which we believe is also unfair. In that way, what we're trying to promote here is a watertight argument which we can use as Muslims in the Dawah, but also to kind of understand this whole phenomena in and of itself, whereby it's going to be very difficult for people to try and unpack it and to try and say this is wrong, right? So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be referencing the classical tafsir, meaning the classical exegeses, right? Because they cannot have been impacted by the scientific narrative, by virtue of the fact that they came before science had discovered things about science. We're also going to go systematically through the supposed scientific miracles in a thematic way. So in the first episode we're doing today is about the creation of the heavens and the earth. So let's get straight into this, right? Let's see first of all what Zakir Naik has to say about the creations of the heavens and the earth, and let's see what actually we can make of this.
There was a secondary separation which gave rise to galaxies, the stars, the planets, the sun, the moon, and the earth on which we live. This they called as the Big Bang. The glorious Quran mentions this in a nutshell 1400 years ago in Surah Anbiya, chapter number 21, verse number 30.
So as you can see here, he's talking about the Big Bang, and his claim is that the Big Bang can be found in the Quranic discourse.
Yeah.
What's your position on that? What do you think of that?
I think it's important before we go into that to talk briefly about how we should view the modern day scientific theory in comparison with the Quran.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is that to place a fundamental guiding overarching principle would be to say that, you know, this is between two opposites, the haqq, the truth, is always in the middle. Yeah. And you know, many dawabit or principles are mentioned by scholars who specialize in tafsir and what we call a tafsir al-ilmi, or the scientific tafsir, which we see being propagated by many du'at, many callers of Islam, such as Zakir Naik.
Right.
And the summary is that if there is something, and you covered this I think with Sabur, that if there is something which is an undeniable scientific truth or reality or observation, and it's unquestionable and it's proven and it's accepted and agreed upon, then the ayah in question may be interpreted accordingly. It may be interpreted accordingly. Then it's possible, if we can do that, and we can interpret it accordingly, but we cannot unequivocally state that this is what Allah meant in this ayah. And it's important to not say this because we haven't got a clear text that says Allah meant to say this.
Right. So, for example, taking this ayah in chapter 21, verse 30, right? First of all, is there any tafsir which correspond to the Big Bang?
You see, Al-Fakhr al-Razi, many of the mufassirin, many of the scholars have spoken about this ayah.
Yeah.
And there isn't a one single agreed upon interpretation of this ayah, even back in the day, even back, you know, 1,000 years ago. Yeah. He mentions in his tafsir, a very famous tafsir, it's called a tafsir al-Kabir. He says that he mentions roughly about 4 or 5 different types of tafsir. One of them is that where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا, that the heavens and the earth were a single entity, فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا. Fataq is the opposite of ratq. So ratq is to join something together. And fataq, and this is of course speaking in the Arabic language, fataq is to take it apart. Yeah. So this is one interpretation given, and he quotes from Ibn Abbas, the famous companion, and others from the early generations had this opinion. The other quite famous opinion on this ayah, and this is according to the majority of the people of tafsirs, is that the heavens and the earth, they were joined together, they were one thing in reference to its hardness, in reference to its perfectness. Yeah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala separated between them by their characteristics. So he gave the heavens, or the sky as we refer to it, the sky over the earth, the characteristic of having rain and raining, and the ard, or the earth, by letting plantation and growth grow in it. Yeah, and this is supported by the following ayah that comes after, وَجَعَلْنَا مِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, and we made everything مِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ, and we made everything from water, every living thing from water. So every living thing has a characteristic that it has water in it. Right. And this is propagated, and this is supported by many of the mufassirun. Another interpretation given by Abu Muslim al-Asfahani is that what fatq could mean, it could mean a metaphor meaning that something was not, or something was created. Something was created out of nothing. So here you see fatq and ratq, or ratq and fatq are complete opposites, meaning that the heavens and the earth were nothing, and then Allah created it. So this is the tafsir given.
So here it's not, would you say it's not proper for us to say that the Quran is referencing definitely the Big Bang?
As I said earlier, we cannot say this. We cannot say this. And the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't reveal the Quran to be a book of scientific theory, or a book that can be applied to scientific theory and then rejected. It's revealed as a book to guide us, the Muslims, to be a guidance for all of mankind to the akhirah.
But at the same time, it can be interpreted in that way.
It can be interpreted in that way if this scientific theory in and of itself is a reality, a truth.
Yeah, okay.
And this is a contentious point in and of itself.
Right.
And if there is space to be interpreted, and we have this interpretation in the past, then it's possible it could be, but we cannot state that this is what Allah meant by this. We cannot state that this is definitely what Allah meant in this ayah.
Right, and obviously if we do, there's the problem of, okay, now if we say the Big Bang model is the popular model of today, tomorrow they change it to another model.
Exactly, and this is
continually change around.
And so when we accept it today, we might reject the Quran tomorrow.
And physics is incredibly fluid in terms of paradigm shifts and things like that. So
it happens every day.
Yeah, it happens almost on a, let's say, decade basis. Like A-level books in physics were completely different to maybe 20 years ago as they are today.
Precisely. Paradigm shifts are common.
Let's go to the other things. The other thing that was commonly mentioned is وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. That they, in Surah Daaee, chapter 51 of the Quran,
verse 47,
the heaven is being created with power, and we are steadily expanding it.
No.
Is this the correct translation, first?
It could be interpreted as that. Again, there's difference of opinion as the word aid. What does aid mean here? وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ, and we are indeed, as you said, expanding it. Some of the mufassirun have mentioned, such as Al-Qurtubi, he quotes that there are a number of different interpretations given. Qadirun, we are able, we are all powerful. Al-Jawhari says that the best meaning of this is that we are not in need of anyone and we are powerful. So Jawhari here has encompassed all of the previous interpretations given into one particular qawl, one particular opinion. Right. So it's not necessarily that we are expanding.
Okay.
In fact, the strongest opinion is that we are all able. We are all powerful.
And is there any contradiction between those? Could someone theoretically believe in both of those things, able and
absolutely? Absolutely.
The problem I see is that here it says was-samaa banaynaha bi'aydin wa inna lamusi'un. So it doesn't say was-samaa ad-dunya banaynaha bi'aydin wa inna lamusi'un.
Yeah.
So the idafa or the adam idafa here, you don't have dunya, because we know that samaa ad-dunya, as per Surah Al-Mulk, is where you find any stars, right?
Yeah.
As-samaa.
So you can translate. How do you translate that? As possibly universe, or?
Because the thing is, I mean, I don't want to do that myself, but the point is, I'm saying, it's not saying was-samaa dunya, so it's not saying this worldly,
the sky, as you can,
this thing above us
directly,
absolutely expanded.
And this is from, again, the principles of tafsir, because here in the ayah Allah says was-samaa, so there's alif and there's a lam before the word sama, and in tafsir, usul of tafsir, we say ta'um, yani there's umum, there's generality, so it could possibly encompass all of these things.
Okay. So it could mean all the 7 heavens. It
could mean all of these. And for you to restrict it to one particular thing, again, you need a clear text on this.
Right.
Which
so once again, it's an interesting verse. It could correlate to what's going on according to the theory, but we can't be too sure about that, and we shouldn't use that to propagate Islam.
Absolutely not, because again, there are different tafsir, different opinions given by the mufassirun on this, and even just from the Arabic language, we can say that you cannot restrict it to this particular meaning, and as if you restricted the Quran to something.
Okay. On the other hand, though, we have some people who are maybe, let's say, trying to attack Islam.
Yep.
So let me give you this one particular personality on the internet. He said that he lists it as one of the reasons why he left Islam, and he says that Islam advocates that the earth was created before the heaven.
Yeah.
So, and obviously he quotes the verse هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا ثم استوى إلى السماء فسواهن سبع سماوات in Surah Al-Baqarah. That he's the one who created everything in the earth. Then he turned to the heaven and he made them to 7 heavens.
Yeah, also Surah Fussilat as well here.
Yeah. So the point here is this the only interpretation we have?
Yep. Again, this particular ayah and Surah Fussilat as well, a number of places in the Quran, this isn't the only interpretation given.
Right.
This isn't the only interpretation given by the classical scholars. You have, for example, Al-Lusi, he says in his Kitab Ruh al-Ma'ani, he gives this interpretation. Then Allah intended to create the heavens. Yeah, this is one interpretation given. Ibn Kathir, quite interestingly, he points out something quite interesting. He says Tabari, who was from the 4th generation, and he was considered as really the father of all of the mufassirun, the scholars who explain the Quran. He says that Qatada, who again was from the Salaf, he's the 2nd generation, Tabi'i follower, he differed with them. And he said he differed with some of the other mufassirun, scholars of tafsir, and he said that in fact it shows that the earth was created after the heavens.
Because what it says is هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا ثم استوى إلى السماء. It doesn't say ثم خلق السماء.
It doesn't say and then he created. And again, this is also another interesting thing that Ibn Kathir and others mention. Ibn Juzay again in التسهيل في علوم القرآن, that it could mean that ثم here in Arabic, ثم, we roughly translate it to mean as after. It doesn't necessarily mean it happened, this action before it happened after, or this action after happened before. It could mean that when you speak, it's as if you're given tartib, you're simply reorganizing how you present a structure, how you present a sentence. But it could have no effect on the actual how and when it happened. Yeah. So purely from a linguistic aspect.
Right.
But not a literal aspect.
And I don't want to get people into too much of a kind of tangent here, but there is there is another verse in the Quran, وَالْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَاهَا, which we're going to come back to in another episode talking about something.
Definitely.
But the earth thereafter, we have spread it out and whatnot. So the point is, this would suggest the opposite. It would suggest that the Samat was created first and the heaven was created. The earth was created. It
may, but we'll cover it in the future episode. The reality is that this isn't a contradiction. At all.
Yeah.
And firstly, we believe that it could never be a contradiction in the Quran. It comes from one source, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reality is that even some of the mufassirun of old have mentioned that it could mean that after the creation of the heavens and the earth, whenever a particular opinion they were off, that the earth was spread. Now we know in modern day science that it could be that the tectonic plates were spread after, gradually. Allahu A'lam, this is a possible interpretation to give it. Or it could mean that the vegetation, or it could mean not necessarily that it supports the flat earth theory as some may ascribe to.
Yeah, and we're going to come to that.
Which we'll come
this
to.
is something in the second episode. Some people have claimed about the Quran that it talks about flat Earth, or the Earth being flat. But let's go to another issue here, which is the Ayyam, the Sittat Ayyam, the 6 days that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala خلق السماوات والأرض. Now, what I was reading was Isfahani. He says that اليوم قد يكون أي زمن من الأزمنة. It could be any time period from the time periods, right? But let me play devil's advocate, because when you look at for example, Surah Sajda, chapter 32 of the Quran, yeah, where it says تنزل الأمر من السماء إلى الأرض ثم تعرج إليه في يوم كان ألف سنة مما تعدون. So it says that the affair goes from the heavens to the earth in a day which is worth 1,000
years of your reckoning.
Of your reckoning. Obviously, there's the Surah Al-Ma'arij, chapter 70, I think, verse 6 or something like that. 50,000 years. And we know that this is talking about 2 different days, first and foremost.
Absolutely.
That's talking about the Day of Judgment, and this is talking about something else.
Yep.
But some Mufassirun have said that this 1,000 days is referencing the khalq of the samawati wal ard, the creation of the heavens and the earth. And if we fall into that, then we're going to say, then what's the difference between you and the young earth creation of the Christians? So how would you respond to that?
Again, it's not to do tahammul of the Quran and to apply the Quran according to a modern scientific theory of that. It comes down to the linguistic meaning of the word yawm.
Yeah.
Which, as you said, you quote from Asfahani, that yawm could mean something which is a long period of time, not restricted to the 24 hours that we know. And this is something quoted by many of the Lughawiyun, many of the scholars of the language, not necessarily going into the tafsir of it.
Right.
So just by understanding this, and again, the Quran came in Arabic to the Arab, and so we interpret it according to how the Arabs would understand their language.
And the Quran doesn't make it clear how long the day was.
Again, if you say yawm, then you cannot apply what we know as a day, a 24-hour day, or 12 hours and 12 hours, and you can't apply to this is what meant back there, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant.
So it's true that it could mean that these 6 periods are actually just 6 periods, but we don't know how, we can't say that.
The length of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you can't.
Okay, that's fine. Another thing that's put forward is we were talking about in relation to the heavens and the earth, is the reference in Surah Al-Fussilat to the Dukhan.
Yeah.
So to the what's referred to as smoke. Some say that this links to the Big Bang.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It's similar to what we discussed in the ayah of Anbiya. All of these ayat are connected. The 3 ayat, the 3 verses that we spoke about, they're all connected to the creation of the heavens and the earth. Some of the Mufassirun, the scholars have said, such as Ibn Kathir, have said that what is meant by Dukhan here is al-ma' al-mutasa'id, bukhar, kind of like smoke. Again, some of the Mufassirun said that you can't, or vapor, and some have said that you can't do this because
is that based on any nas, any like evidence
from another ayah or a hadith from Rasulullah? No, it's not.
Okay.
So this is the interpretation again given by the Mufassirun themselves, which could be rejected or could be accepted.
Okay. Right.
And if something hasn't been made clear, then again you cannot put yourself into that and to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant this unequivocally.
And the same thing would apply with the Big Bang, of course.
The same thing would apply. The theory that is accepted today, it may be rejected tomorrow.
Right. Okay. So here, just commenting. So here, what it seems like is happening is people are being selective, right?
Absolutely.
It could be the case that you have an ayah which has more than one interpretation, right?
Absolutely.
And it has more than one tafsir. Obviously, there's many mufassirun.
Of course.
The ones who want to promote Islam and promote Islam as being absolutely in line with scientific evidence, which it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be, as we've explained, will say that these are the things that make it in line with the science, and then they'll quote the tafsir. The ones who want to say that Islam is in contradiction with the scientific evidence,
they'll be selective on the tafsir that they choose.
So this guy who we saw here talking about the earth being created before the heaven, he's falling into that.
Absolutely. He completely ignored what the major tafsir have said, such as tafsir al-Qurtubi, Ahkam al-Quran, and it's quite shocking, to be honest with you. No.
So the point we're trying to make here,
academic dishonesty.
Could we say here, if we want to be as honest as possible, I think the argument we could make from a Daawa perspective, because once again we have to not only think about how we can understand this mas'ala, the situation ourselves, but how we can package it for people of Daawa. This is the way I put it, and tell me what you think of this.
Okay.
I say, and this is a conditional statement I put, right? If you take science as a good yardstick for truth, then the Quran is the most closely correlated ancient religion to the scientific discourse. And here I'm being very selective with my terminology, because I'm not saying it has to be completely compatible. I'm saying it's most correlated, if you compare it, for example, with the biblical narrative of Genesis,
Then
there's no way you can interpret that in a way which can even correspond to science in any way, shape or form.
agreed.
So from this perspective, and you can say, some have advocated this now, it's like a multi-layered kind of dimensional approach where people today could, yani from their own tadabbur perspective, from their own pondering perspective, they could interpret the Quran in a scientific way.
Yeah.
They're in their rights to do that, so long as they don't say unequivocally, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant.
Absolutely, yeah. As long as it's within the realms of tafsir, within the realms of the principles of tafsir, which again is not something that everyone can go ahead and interpret it. From a tadabbur perspective, then yes, it's possible to extract points of benefit from it.
Right.
But we have to be very careful about falling into speaking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge,
Right.
And saying that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant in this, which is something very, very, very dangerous.
What's really powerful about this is that someone from a scientific, that has a scientific background, for example,
Yeah.
doesn't have to reevaluate their scientific beliefs
Absolutely.
before becoming a Muslim. Whereas, let's, for example, a literalistic biblical Bible, thumper, whatever you want to call them, people that really
Yeah.
believe in the
Yeah.
Bible and
Yeah.
advocate the biblical teaching, would have to, in order to be kind of
A Christian.
to be a Christian,
Yeah.
they'd have to reject it or say or metaphorize it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that you could say that's a distinction.
It's a massive distinction, and this
Yeah.
is again from the beauty of the Quran. This is again from the beauty of the Quran and from the beauty of Islam in and of itself. But it's important again that we don't necessarily speak about or fall into the trap of changing our beliefs
Yeah.
due to what the scientific theory says of today.
Okay, so here we've talked about kind of the beginning of the heavens and the earth. We talked about the Big Bang and the expanding universe. We talked about these things. There's one other thing here which I found quite interesting. And to be honest with you, I found it really like one of the furthest things away from what can be interpreted. Here, the reference is "Samawati wal ardu ma baynahuma."
Okay.
Yeah, Zakir Naik here has something to say about this. So let's see what he has to say.
Lately, the scientists have discovered that there are bridges of matter in the interstellar space. It's not vacuum, and it is called as plasma. And they say this matter is in a form of gaseous matter, which has equal number of positive ions as well as electrons. And the Quran mentions 1400 years ago in Surah Furqan, chapter number 25, verse number 59. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who has created the heavens and the earth, as well as things in between it. So Quran says there is matter in between the heavens and the earth, which today science, they say that this plasma can be considered as the fourth type of matter.
So now we've seen the clip. He says, "Samawati wal ardu." This ma baynahuma, what's between the heavens and earth, refers to plasma. Is this feasible?
Again, using the principles that we've laid out,
Yeah.
which is something agreed upon by all of Mufassirun, all the scholars of tafsir, of course you cannot say this.
Yeah.
Because again, this is something that where the ayah may not necessarily allow that to be said, and there is nothing that has been said before you, and no one from the Salaf has said this.
Okay.
There is no
one,
opinion about this.
there's no tafsir to suggest
No
that.
tafsir to support. There's no precedent to agree to this.
Right.
And so we delve
the
into
linguistic meaning couldn't mean.
linguistically, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
So this
But
should be
it's
just,
possible
This
that it
kind
could
of
mean
thing
that.
should be just kind of thrown in the bin.
Again, it has to be subject to due diligence and bahth, and it requires bahth on this.
Okay.
But generally, from the outset, no.
Okay,
No.
I agree with that.
Allah.
I second that. So here, that's the end of the first episode, guys. I hope you have actually took benefit from this session. What we're trying to do is we're trying to be as academically honest as possible.
Absolutely.
We want to say about Allah Subhanahu wa Taala's words that which is we can say based on the language, based on what people have said before about it, and also based on the evidence that we have in terms of the physical world around us, but within limitations. And I hope you've taken benefit from this. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about geocentricity versus heliocentricity, the rotations of the heavens and the earth, the rotations of celestial bodies in the sky, and things like that. And this has been an area of controversy
Absolutely.
for some people. Till then, we'll see you soon.